All right, I'm going to call to order the April 29th meeting of the Minneapolis Planning Commission. My name is Alyssa Lipke-Peer, and I will be serving as chair of the meeting in absence of the president, Commissioner Rockwell. I am joined today by Commissioners Ellison, Brown, Cogill, Coleman, and Schroeder. And our first order of business will be to approve the actions from the April 15th, 2019 meeting. Can I get a motion? Right. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices. And a reminder that if you plan to testify at tonight's meeting, to please sign in the hallway outside at some point this evening. All right, our next order of business is to sort the agenda for this meeting. If you do not have an agenda, they're available out on the table in the hallway. We will sort them into items that will be continued to future meetings, items that will be discussed, and items that will be put on the consent agenda. Starting number one, is anyone here to discuss the Ramsey Street Northeast vacation of Ward 3, which is item number 1? All right, seeing none, we'll put that on the consent agenda. Oh, sorry, my apologies. That's motion to be, or the recommendation is to be continued until the May 13th, 2019 Planning Commission hearing. All right, item number 2 is the Art and Architecture Building Development at 3326 and 3338 and 3350 University Avenue. The recommended motion is to approve the application for the preliminary plat. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Okay, are you here to speak on the plat or on the development in general? On the application. The application is for the final plat? Okay. Then we can pull that from consent, although if it's about the development in general, that's already been approved and isn't anything we can consider tonight. So we'll pull item number 2 from the consent agenda and hear that item tonight. Item number 3 is 2931 Marshall Street Northeast. Recommended motion is to approve the application for a minor subdivision. Is anyone here to speak against or opposed to the staff recommendation on that item? Is it, no? Okay, then we'll keep that on consent. Item number 4 is 3017, 3021, and 3025 East Calhoun Parkway. This item was continued, and the current staff recommendation is to continue it to the May 13th meeting. Is there anyone here tonight that wants to offer testimony on this? Otherwise, we'll hear it on the May 13th. Okay, that also. Okay, item number 5 is the North High School field renovation at 1801 Fremont Avenue North. Staff recommendation is approval of all land use applications on that item. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of staff recommendation? Seeing none, we'll put item 5 on consent. And lastly, item number 6, 2521 Bloomington Avenue. Staff recommendation is to approve all land use applications on this item. Is anyone here to speak in opposition to staff recommendation? Okay, we will put that one on the consent agenda as well. So I have that items number 2 will be heard tonight. Items number 1 and 4 will be continued to the May 13th meeting. And items 3, 5, and 6 will be approved on the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting as so stated? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes. At this time, we will discuss the committee of the whole consent agenda. At the April 18th Committee of the Whole, we approved the Red Roll TIF plan, the Northside Art Space Lost TIF plan, and a land sale of 2406 McNair Avenue North. Can I get a motion to find these consistent with the comp plan? So moved. Okay, there's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye, that passes. All right. So now we'll open the public hearing for the items that were on the consent agenda, which were items 2, 5, and 6. Again, I will ask if there's anyone here to speak in, I'm sorry, oh, sorry, 3, 5, and 6. I'm so sorry. You know, I don't do this full time, I guess. Is there anyone here, just take one more time, who'd like to speak in opposition to staff recommendation on items 3, 5, and 6 from tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing on those items and ask for a motion. It's been moved and seconded that those items be approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, abstentions? Thank you. If you're here for items 3, 5, or 6, congratulations. So now we will hear can we get a motion to continue items 1 and 4? There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, items number 1 and 4 are moved to continue to the May 13th meeting, and now we will hear item number 2, the Art and Architecture Building Development at 3326, 38, and 50 University Avenue Southeast by Peter Crandall.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Crandall, Senior City Planner with CPED Land Use. The application before you is for preliminary and final plat for the Art and Architecture project. The application is to combine 3 existing parcels into one parcel. This is a requirement in ordinance for the planned unit development application that was previously approved, Plan 6619, for a 14-story mixed-use project at the 3 parcels that are reflected on the zoning map here. It's a straightforward combination of 3 existing parcels. There is a variance to create a new parcel that has 5 or more sides, given that the existing underlying parcels, none of them have that condition, but otherwise it's a fairly straightforward application.
All right, thank you, Peter. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in regard to this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Gayla Lint, I'm at 1 Seymour Avenue Southeast. I'm within 350 feet of that property. I appreciate that this is intended to be a fairly straightforward process, but I would say that this has been anything but a straightforward project approval process. The staff report incorrectly states that Plan 6619 appeals were denied per discussions at the Zoning and Planning Appeal hearing and per the council action signed by Mayor Fry. The Minneapolis City Council hereby, I'm quoting, the Minneapolis City Council hereby denies in part and grants in part the appeals submitted regarding Plan 6619. The grants in part have to do with additional conditions placed on the project during the appeal. Some of these conditions will likely have significant impact on the overall height, massing, and footprint and number of units for the project. Some could be substantial enough that the project could require additional or a new Planning Commission review. Specifically, this is a condition that was still on the table when this Planning Commission approved the project in June of 2018. The applicant shall provide CPED staff with a detailed design of properly engineered retaining walls in compliance with the Minnesota Building Code, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say here that this is retaining walls not just for the permanent structure, but during the construction process. It is unclear how accurate determinations can be made by this Planning Commission for findings 3 through 5 of the staff report for this application. That's the application to combine the plats. Each of these findings relies on how engineering strategies resolve the significant topography and the extreme nearness of the development to the adjacent properties, both during construction and long-term. Any plan submitted for a preliminary review cannot and should not, in my opinion, in this instance be considered final, in that the generally acceptable engineering strategies in this case would rely on permission from the adjacent property owners to drill dozens of tiebacks into the earth that would remain after construction. I would ask the Planning Commission to be assured that the engineering solution proposed at this time either does not rely on the use of private property for construction or staging of construction, or that documentation exists of an agreement with these property owners. And I understand that the developer is in discussion with adjacent property owners about this and other items and is working toward a resolution, yet I am also aware that no such agreements exist at this time. The question of earth retention could and should significantly impact whether the project moves forward without additional Planning Commission review, in that it leaves open questions of temporary and permanent erosion and difficulties from topography, which are all listed in findings 3, finding 4, and finding 5. Specifically, second point, the developer shall confer with a historic consultant to identify and mitigate, to the extent practical, any potential impact on nearby historic properties, including the Witch's Hat Water Tower. This was a condition that was placed on the project after this Planning Commission looked at it. It was during the appeal. An historical consultant, that is to say, a credentialed historian with documented expertise and/or who meets the standards of the Secretary of Interior for Historic Preservation, could determine that substantial changes to the project are warranted in order to mitigate the potential impact on the nearby historic properties. There appears to be no public accounting for or indication that this condition has been met. And I would ask the Planning Commission, please, to not advance again a project that has yet to meet these very significant and substantial conditions that were added to the project based on concerns from neighborhood residents and as part of the public process. And third and last point, the developer shall work with, this is also a condition added at the appeal, the developer shall work with property owners of adjacent properties to implement screening, and screening and other measures, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I would ask the commissioners whether or not they have documentation that this condition has been met and that this documentation is to be a part of the public record. I am unaware of any adjacent property owners, based on recent discussions with SAME, who have a written agreement with the developer regarding this condition. So there are other concerns about how this project moves forward, arguably a lot of, I would say, cart before the horse on very, very substantial issues. I know certain details aren't going to be worked out until the end, but I am talking about some very severe issues for which we don't have time for me to outline them all here, nor is it proper because I understand this is just about the plat. But I would ask and thank you for considering whether it's in the public best interest to continue to advance a project with so many consequential outstanding conditions, especially those that directly relate to the staff report finding of 3, 4, and 5, which is about the erosion and the topography and the safety, both permanently and during construction. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll close public testimony on this item. We will discuss item number 2, which is the approval of the preliminary and final plat. Commissioner Colgill, did you have a comment? Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, Commissioner Coleman.
It's not? Is it on now? Okay. My question is, given the list of concerns by the speaker, the testifier, can you just describe the process under which all of those terms that were part of the approval and the planned unit development will be satisfied prior to construction?
Sure. So with regard to the soil retention and retaining wall issue, the applicant's also here to speak to this if you have specific questions for them. But those are details which can't really be worked out at the level of development that's been presented thus far in the approvals process. The applicant will be required to submit a full building permit set, which would then be reviewed by CPED code compliance staff for compliance with Minnesota Building Code and other issues. So they would look at that issue at that time. But that's a condition that was placed on the application by the City Council after the appeals process, and it's a little too soon to have a determination on that. But with regard to the 3 findings in the preliminary and final plat application, those tend to be more critical when new parcels are being created from a subdivision versus the combination of existing pre-developed parcels, such that a newly created parcel is not undevelopable. In this case, we have 3 previously developed parcels, so the area of purview for review about construction concerns would happen later in the process. With regard to the historic aspects of the site, as was determined through the land use application approvals process, the site is not historically designated, nor is it located within a historic district, and so there's limited purview for historic preservation on the site. Although there was much discussion about that through the process, there was also a special public hearing and information item at the Heritage Preservation Commission that examined and discussed the issue of views to and from historic landmarks in the city, and whether the Historic Preservation Commission is interested in looking at that issue further and examining different ways that the city might regulate those aspects of historic properties. The city council person who placed that condition on the project considers that to have been met by that consultation with the HPC.
Right, well, and I think I will just add, I thank you for your testimony. I do want to say that when we look at the required findings, they have to be in regard to the application in front of us, which is just for whether or not consolidating these 3 parcels into one to create a plat is appropriate or not, and whether those are directly linked to that. I think your testimony was really interesting as relates to the project as a whole, but that's where those findings would have impact, as opposed to just looking at whether or not the creation of this preliminary and final plat creates those findings. So I think our purview and our scope in terms of what we can do today is very limited to just that purview. So I just wanted to let you know that it's not that we didn't consider it, it's just that it's not directly applicable to this specific application before us. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? Or like to make a motion? Commissioner Brown?
Yes, I will move approval of the preliminary and final plat.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second. Staff, can you please call roll?
Brown?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison? Aye. Kranzer?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
6-0.
All right, that motion passes, and thus concludes our agenda for tonight. Thank you all for coming down, and with that, this meeting is adjourned.